Hello, and the theme for this month at Center for Spiritual Living of Greater Las Vegas is Holy, Holy Uprising. And my topic fits in beautifully with that, which is boldly living a new story. And I emphasize new because this is our time. It's so important to rewrite your story. And you have total permission right now. And I'm not just talking about the individual. Yes, we need to write our own story. But going forward, the United States, the world, the planet needs to write a new story. And it needs to be based on who and what you truly are. Let me give you an example. In Star Trek, you know where it says, boldly go where no man has gone before? We need to boldly redefine who we are in this universe so that we can go forward. And the word for that is evolution. As humans, we're evolving. We're evolving into who we've always been, but really never recognized. So let me take you to that place so that you can write your own story boldly. So what does that mean? That means that most humans are looking at their life from a lower frequency, meaning that they're looking at their life through all the things that have happened to them. And so they identify as a victim. This is a lower frequency. It's not a God frequency. And in order to evolve, we need to step into the identity of God. Now, for thousands of years, we've been told that's blasphemy. But we're living in a time where if we don't make that connection, if we don't make that leap, if we don't rewrite that story, then we're doomed to repeat more victimization, more violence, more anger, more division, and more polarization. So we need to leap into light years of thinking. We need to leave the past victimization and horror and division behind us and step into who we always have been, but we're not brave enough and not told a correct story of who we truly are. And we are powerful beyond measure. We are empathic beings. We have intelligence that is beyond words and goes into telepathy and understanding and connecting with energy. And if this sounds woo-woo, then I'm asking you to take a leap into who you truly are. And I understand you've never been taught this in school. You've been taught information that you're just supposed to regurgitate, so you never really know your own story. And so I understand that we all come from this weak educational vibratory energy that keeps us under control. I understand that. But now is a time to let go of the story. So let me talk individually. I can give examples in my own life. As a matter of fact, the first time that I taught at Center for Spiritual Living at Greater Las Vegas, I told the story of 20, 30 years ago when I was attending a couples group for couples that were going through divorce and going through tough times. I talked about having my infant son in the stroller, and I talked about how I lifted that stroller down the stairs as I realized that my marriage was over. And as a matter of fact, I kind of associated my marriage with my whole world, my whole life. And I really felt like a victim in that moment. But I would not be standing here today if I had not turned that story into an empowering tale where I was the hero. And I didn't need to make anyone the villain. All I needed to do was come up higher in the realization of how powerful and courageous I am, self-contained in this temple of God. That I didn't need something else to fulfill me or something else to destroy me. That I was indestructible. So I want to just give you a few tips on how to get to that point, because there are so many people that have stories from 30 years ago of victimization that they still tell that victimization story 30 years later when they're talking to a friend. And it's an indication of how you've stored that story within yourself, and it has dictated a lot of victim experiences ever since. So how do you write a bold new story and begin to live it? Well, first of all, I understood that I felt like a victim. And I also understood that every time I told that story to my friend or to my sister or to my relative, I was increasing the vibration of woe is me, I'm not good enough, this is not fair. And so I realized I needed to stop telling the story. So when people would ask me how things are going, I would be saying, you know, things are in process, they're in flux. But I didn't go down the road of victimization by retelling and refeeling all of those feelings. And I wasn't looking for sympathy from other people. They couldn't help me get to that core of who I am. I knew I needed to dig for that. And so I began digging, who am I? What is this teaching me? How can I be my most empowered self instead of a lower self, weaker? So after I stopped telling the story, I started asking, what am I supposed to learn from these experiences? What are the lessons? What's trying to emerge in me that I needed this to happen? What is that I am supposed to incorporate into my evolution? That is key. And so I started asking those questions. And over time, I got answers. Over time, I realized the treasure in that story, in that event. And the treasure was that you are powerful beyond measure. And I needed to give you an impetus to make you uncomfortable enough to find your strength. And that's what that event was all about. So now, years later, the story that I tell when people need a story, I give them the story of strength, of how I overcame, of the power and the strength that came from within me that I didn't even know was there, but I needed an event to show me what was there. So I'm asking you today, what wounds are you carrying around with you years later that you've never looked at to find the lesson that maybe you continue to tell other people to get sympathy? Maybe it's a story that you truly believe that you were done wrong and that you need to tell it to get that anger out. Well, let me tell you, that anger is like a trail clearing. So if you've ever been to the national parks or you've ever been on a hiking trail, you notice that the trails are well marked. You can see that they have dug around and maybe even put rocks on that trail so that other people can find that trail. That's exactly what you do every time you tell a victim story to yourself or to other people. You're making a trail in your brain and your consciousness and also in your vibrational energy. And you're putting out markers so that other victim experiences, other things that match that vibration will find their way into your life. By the same token, every time you tell an empowering story, yes, this happened, but I discovered the strength and love within myself. Yes, I had an alcoholic father, but it taught me how to love unconditionally. When you have those types of stories, when you rewrite that story, you're also setting up markers inside of your brain, and you continue to tell yourself these empowering stories even though there's chaos around you. You've learned how to be the alchemist, the shapeshifter, and you shape it into something where you can lay out the markers for other wonderful, empowering, abundant things to find their way into your life, because you put out the sign that says, I am boldly living a new story. And wouldn't that be awesome if we could all do that? But mostly what you find is that people are living from their wounds. Don Miguel Ruiz, who wrote the Four Agreements, talked about the walking wounded. That there are people that are just walking wounds. And everything you say is a wound to them. Even a look can be a wound, a trigger. And so people are triggered and that anger is sparked, and what finds their way into their life and into the lives of those around them? Victimization, anger, the well-marked trail coming into their life because that's what they expect, because that's the story they've been told. So ask yourself, what wounds do I have? Because I've never changed my story. Am I the walking wounded? And oftentimes people are so unaware because they blame other people. It's their fault. She shouldn't have brought that up. Why is she doing this when she knows? All of that kind of stuff is a shield that keeps people from looking at their own wounds and their own stories about their wounds. And there are plenty of people that you can talk to that 10 years ago, that event is so fresh, and they tell it and live it and experience it as if it's happening now. And it's not. So our perception is so key to writing our story. The other thing that I'd like to talk about and give you a tool on how to change your story is you need to have examples of people in your life who have transcended events, transcended victimization, and gone into higher realms of identification. And if you don't have that example of someone walking on this planet, in the world but not of the world, that is exuding that vibration of God energy, then you have to be the example to someone else. So it's worth doing the work of rewriting the story. It's worth going to that place where you've avoided and said, well, there's nothing but pain there. What I'm challenging you to do is, there's a treasure there. And until you alchemize it, turn that lead into gold, turn that pain into triumph, or another way of looking at it, then that wound will still be there, and you'll be part of the walking wounded. Now, countries, the United States is a walking wound. Looking at the past, it needs to identify It needs to acknowledge that these things happened, this pain happened, but we can transform it once we acknowledge it into what are the lessons that we've learned. And one of the lessons, the biggest lesson is, who are you and who do you want to be going forward? And when we can connect with that as a country and say, who are we? And say, this is who we are. It's not what we exhibited in the past, acknowledging that, but it's time to move forward into the Christ consciousness, which exudes love, encouragement, compassion, trust, and power. We can do that individually, and we can do it as a country. And we can do it as a planet. But it has to come from, who are you? And if you identify with the past story, then you will always be that pain, that wound. And everything else that you create from that will be representative of that wound. So right now, it is time for us to say, I am that I am. It is not blasphemous to know that the temple of God is within us. And as Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Meaning all it takes is for us to really look and say, where do I want to come from? And is it the most empowering? When we come from that empowering Christ consciousness, we begin to see that in others. We begin to have the eyes of God. But it cannot happen if we are stuck in our wounds, because then all we see are other triggers that trigger us and our wounding. Let's take a deep breath. There is another technique that I'd like to share with you, and it's called the 4 Strands of Gratitude. This is a way that you can rewrite that story to be very bold, and also to bring forth that I am presence in everything that you create. The first strand of gratitude is something that is very common. This is something that most people do, especially at Thanksgiving. They're grateful for everything they can see. And they'll say, I'm grateful for the turkey, I'm grateful for my family, I'm grateful for my house, whatever it is, whatever you can see, you're grateful for. And that is a first step. But there's another deeper way, and that is to be grateful for things that you can't see. I'm grateful for my safety. I'm grateful for the energy that is all around me, my ancestors protecting me. You see, I've gone from things that you can see to things that you can't see. I'm grateful that I rewrote my story, that I'm no longer tied and limited to that victim story. I'm so glad I rewrote it and found the treasures in it. Those are things that you can be grateful for and thankful for. The second strand of gratitude is actively looking for things to be grateful for. So when you're on your walk and you happen to see this flower sticking out of the concrete, you see it. The person next to you may not see it because they don't have this spiritual practice. But you begin to see all the glorious things around you that you may have been oblivious to before. Because when you're in your victim story, you see life through a straw. And you don't see the full picture. You don't even know there's anything else out there. But as you begin to expand, your vision begins to expand. And you begin to see the good where people are just not seeing anything good at all. You are the light shower. You show the light on things that are good, and you see them, and you look for them as a spiritual practice. The third strand of gratitude is that you look at your past. And you look at your past and you see the good. You see the lesson. You see how it made you grow. You see how it made you evolve. And you ask yourself, could I have evolved to this point of love without that thing happening? And the answer is no. That all of those things in our past allowed us to see aspects of who we truly are. It allowed us to see patience, unconditional love towards ourselves. And then we can give it to other people. So looking at your past and seeing the gifts in that and being grateful for those events that happened. Those events shape you into your most empowered self. Because if you survive that, oh, precious, what gifts and strengths you have within you going forward. And the fourth strand of gratitude, that when you begin to braid those other three, the fourth one becomes powerful. This is where your lion aspect is. The fourth one is affirming and manifesting the highest good for yourself and for others. And you can call this prayer, you can call it manifestation, but this is where you call it forth. You're not asking, you're not begging the universe for anything. You have become one, your true identity with the universe, and you call forth in affirmative prayer what it is that you want to create. But you've done the work. You've done all three steps, and when you get to that fourth step, you are the head and not the tail. You are the creative source because the temple of God is within you. And as your whole chakras begin to align, that energy shoots up. That electromagnetic energy is a wave, and it goes quantumly, creating in the mystical realm any type of matter that you want to bring forth into the 3D realm. This is called power. And it cannot be activated unless you have had the love, the experiences, rewrote your story, and then come out on the other side as pure light. And that is who you are. You're not taught that, but it comes through your experiences as you boldly begin to live this new story of who you are. Oh, let's take a deep breath. Just so overjoyed to share this with you. Because as you begin to live it, you become an example for the world. And you begin to change this whole paradigm. It is not stronger than you. You are more powerful than you can ever imagine. Love you.